Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Everybody grab your seats. Please turn off your cell phone or at least on vibrate. I guess in golfing you call this a mulligan. I call it a do-over. So we're going to take another look at the Fishery Management Plan, the Striped Mullet FMP Supplement to Amendment 1. So I'd like for our staff to go ahead and take us through this, please.
I just want to start by saying there's going to be a lot of overlap between this presentation and the one that we presented in February, but there's going to be some new stuff and some clarifications, so please pay attention to those because that'll be the meat of this. My name is Jeff Dobbs. I'm with our Fisheries Management section based out of the Central District Office in Morehead City. I'm also one of the co-leads for Striped Mullet. With me today is Willow Patton, who is based out of the Washington office. Dan Zaff should be here. He's running a little late, but he'll be here.
I apologize. Bad at estimating traffic.
It's a grand entrance. So we're here today to discuss Supplement A to Amendment 1 to the Striped Mullet FMP, which would implement temporary management measures to end overfishing of the North Carolina striped mullet stock. Here's a rundown of what this presentation will cover. During the first part of the presentation, we'll discuss results of the striped mullet stock assessment completed by the division in 2022, which prompted development of Supplement A, and we'll clarify some questions and misconceptions about that assessment and provide some additional information. In the second part of the presentation, we'll discuss the need for temporary management measures, review the timeline of Supplement A, and then we'll discuss some new regional split options. We'll finish by reviewing the DMF recommendations and the MFC preferred option from November 22. The division completed a benchmark stock assessment of the striped mullet stock in 22. Results of the peer-reviewed assessment indicate overfishing is occurring and the stock is overfished. The spawning stock biomass is below the threshold in 2019, indicating the stock is overfished. There are not enough mature females in the population to maintain the stock. The stock has been overfished since 2002 and below the target since 1991. This figure shows the fishing mortality rate calculated by the model. Fishing mortality in 2019 is above the threshold, indicating overfishing is occurring. The catch rate is too high. The stock has been experiencing overfishing since 2012, and fishing mortality has been above the target since 2000. Since the stock assessment was first presented to the Commission at the May 2022 meeting, we have heard repeated concerns over differences between the 2022 assessment and previous assessments. I just wanted to take a few minutes to address the changes and highlight the improvements made to the current stock assessment. The stock assessments completed in 2002 and 2013 noted the stock was heavily exploited and younger age classes were contributing most of the reproduction requiring cautious management because of a series of poor recruitment events could cause concerns for sustainability of the stock. Both assessments noted concerns about data uncertainty, and the 2013 assessment also noted lack of contrast in the data and high variability associated with survey indices were major concerns. The 2018 assessment update indicated overfishing was not occurring and could not determine if the stock was overfished. Results indicated essentially no change in fishing mortality across the time series, and F was well below the target, which was inconsistent with previous assessments. However, as with the 2013 assessment, the model indicated declining recruitment and spawning stock biomass. This assessment also noted major concerns with model configuration and input data and recommended addressing these in the next benchmark assessment. The 22 assessment required in-person peer review workshops. These workshops allowed division, stock assessment scientists, and staff to work with external experts in stock assessment and striped mullet biology and ecology to produce the best model for management use. The 2022 assessment incorporated several improvements identified by staff in previous assessments, including adding 2 additional years of data, extending landings data back to 1950 from 1994, used alternative data weighting, changed selectivity of the commercial fishery, increased length at maturity in response to new more robust study results, included recreational removals. Additionally, after a thorough evaluation of all possible indices, data from the striped bass independent gillnet survey in Albemarle Sound were not included in the 2022 stock assessment because the division determined the methodology used and limited area sampled did not provide an accurate representation of the striped mullet stock. Data from the striped mullet electrofishing survey in the Neuse River and its tributaries were initially included in the 22 stock assessment, but after consultation with the peer reviewers, the decision was made to exclude these data. The survey was excluded primarily because of the limited geographic area sampled and because the sampling area falls within the sampling area of Program 915. The Program 146, or electrofishing survey, data conflicted with data from Program 915, and different components of the electrofishing survey, the spring and fall, conflicted with each other. Program 915 was the only abundance index used in the 22 assessment. After consultation with peer reviewers, an index using a start year of 2008 and including data from Pamlico Sound, Neuse, Pamlico, Pungo, and New Rivers was developed for inclusion in the model. The shortened time series compared to the 2018 stock assessment was to allow the addition of the New River portion of 915, which began in 2008. The peer reviewers felt this survey was an ideal source of relative abundance data and suggested this survey as a good candidate for monitoring the striped mullet population. A weak relationship between the number of spawning females and the number of new fish joining the population in following years, known as stock-recruit relationship, prevented previous stock assessments from determining if the stock was overfished. The 2022 stock assessment was able to make this determination. Following advice and suggestions from the peer reviewers, corrections made to the model configuration and reevaluation of life history data using new tools suggested a stronger stock-recruit relationship, facilitating a determination of overfished status. The peer reviewers suggested, and the division agrees, problems with configurations of the model used in 2018 stock assessment likely account for the differences in these results. At the February meeting, several commissioners requested the DMF to provide any updated information that could help to inform their decision on management for Supplement A. The two figures here show the preliminary gillnet survey index of abundance by year on the left and commercial landings by year on the right. The gillnet survey index has been standardized to account for how environmental variables may impact distribution of striped mullet. The 2022 abundance estimate dropped significantly from 2021 to the lowest in the time series. As a reminder, Program 915 was not sampled in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic. Commercial landings in 2020 increased significantly for the second year in a row to the second highest in the trip ticket area. I want to reiterate that this data on its own tells us nothing about stock status in relation to fishing mortality and spawning stock biomass in 2022. That information can only be determined through an updated stock assessment. However, continued high landings without continued increases in abundance on a stock that was already overfished and experiencing overfishing provides some indication that stock status has not improved since 2019. I'll now move into discussing Supplement A to Amendment 1 to the striped mullet FMP. I will review how we got to this point, the timeline for the supplement, then review options presented at the November 22 meeting, and the Commission preferred management option. I'll finish by going over the new regional split options the DMF have developed for your consideration, then the Commission will vote on adoption of Supplement A. Just to review the supplement, a supplement allows for implementation of temporary management measures to supplement Amendment 1 until Amendment 2 is adopted. If the DEQ Secretary determines it is in the interest of the long-term viability of the fishery. Given the stock is overfished and overfishing is occurring, ending overfishing immediately is in the long-term interest of the fishery because it begins rebuilding spawning stock biomass and meets the statutory requirement to end overfishing in 2 years. A 9.3% reduction in total removals is needed to reduce F to the fishing mortality threshold, which ends overfishing, and a 33% reduction in total removals is needed to reduce F to the fishing mortality target. Temporary management measures developed in the supplement will be implemented via the proclamation authority of the DMF director. It is important to remember that whether or not Supplement A is adopted, Amendment 2 management measures will be based on the 2022 stock assessment results, and management measures to achieve these harvest reductions will still need to be implemented to meet statutory requirements. Overfishing is occurring and SSB is very low. The supplement ends overfishing and gets us a jump start on rebuilding the stock. We could be looking at larger reductions in the future if we don't take action now. This fishery is very recruitment driven. That is, it is very dependent on successful spawning and survival of new year classes. Because the stock age structure has been reduced to mostly younger fish, the fishery currently operates like the stock is in an annual crop delayed by a year or two. The fishery as a whole is dominated by the roe fishery and primarily harvests age 2 fish. This means the stock age structure is limited and the fishery mainly targets females that have just matured. If we have a bad recruitment year and the fishery continues to operate as it did last year, we could seriously impact the already low SSB. Reducing F this year minimizes that risk. Looking at the timeline of how we got to where we are now, in May 2022, the MFC reviewed results of the 22 striped mullet stock assessment, indicating the striped mullet stock is overfished and overfishing is occurring. In August of 22, the DMF director updated the MFC on need for a supplement to Amendment 1 of the striped mullet FMP. There were no objections. In September of 22, the DEQ secretary determined it is in the interest of the long-term viability of the striped mullet fishery to develop temporary management measures to supplement the striped mullet FMP until Amendment 2 is adopted. Following this conclusion from the DEQ secretary, division staff developed draft Supplement A and presented the draft and recommendations to the MFC in November of 22. At that time, the MFC selected their preferred management option, which was a season closure from November 7th to December 31st to achieve a 22.1 harvest reduction and end overfishing. The division received public comment through an online form and by mail from December 19th through January 19th, 2023. In addition to the online public comment, the division also gave the standing and regional MFC advisory committees the opportunity to provide input on Supplement A when they met in January 2023. In February of this year, the division presented a summary of public comment and the commission was given the opportunity to vote on adoption of Supplement A. 3 motions related to the supplement were made and none passed. With the absence of a majority vote, the matter remains in front of the commission and the MFC chair has placed consideration of Supplement A on the agenda for today. In response to concerns over the unfair impacts to the southern part of the state expressed by some commissioners, the division has developed some regional management options for consideration. In the next few slides, I will review the previous options presented at the November meeting and present the new regional split options developed by the division. Before discussing supplement options, we did want to take some time to address an issue we've heard throughout the supplement process, which is the gill net closures in Pamlico and Neuse Rivers. We've heard from many members of the public that this is an effective measure to reduce harvest of striped mullet that needs to be taken into account when considering additional management measures. The division does not view the gill net closure in Neuse and Pamlico Rivers as an effective conservation measure for striped mullet. Striped mullet make a yearly spawning migration to the ocean. This means that all of the fish that were protected during the first part of the year due to the closure will become available to the fishery during the peak of the striped mullet season as they form large aggregations and begin migrating toward the ocean in the fall. This closure merely delays harvest on these fish until later in the season. As a reminder, despite any closure occurring across all sectors, reductions cannot be quantified for the recreational sector due to data limitations. Therefore, overall reduction calculations are based solely on striped mullet landings from the commercial fishery. That means a 9.9% reduction in commercial harvest is needed to achieve 9.3 overall reduction and a 21.3 to 35.4 reduction in the commercial harvest is needed to meet the 20 to 33% overall reduction for the fishery. All management options are presented as percent reductions to the commercial harvest relative to commercial landings in 2019, the terminal year of the stock assessment. The DMF recommended a 20 to 33% reduction to exceed the threshold and either meet or approach the target. This reduction level increases the probability of, at a minimum, ending overfishing even if there is variability in fishing effort, market demand, striped mullet availability to the fishery, or recruitment. To achieve this reduction, the DMF recommended option 1, a season closure from October 29th through December 31st, or option 2, a season closure from November 7th through December 31st. The MFC selected option 2, a season closure from November 7th through the end of the year, as their preferred management option to achieve a 22.1% reduction and end overfishing. At the February MFC meeting, some commissioners expressed concerns over statewide management in the supplement. Several commissioners felt a statewide end-of-season closure disproportionately affected the southern part of the state where harvest occurs later in the year. The division examined this regional difference by analyzing landings based on the trip ticket county of landing. The northern region was defined as coastal counties north of Onslow County, and the southern region was defined as coastal counties from Onslow County south. The difference in regional seasonality is illustrated in the figure, in this figure. We can see the northern region, represented by the solid line, has its peak harvest in October, while the southern region, represented by the dashed line, has its peak harvest in November. It is important to remember that the magnitude of landings between these two regions is quite different. Overall, the southern region accounts for about 7% of the harvest in the past 5 years. Even during November, when southern region harvest is at its peak, the southern region accounts for only 6% of the harvest. Trip ticket data doesn't indicate there is a lot of participation overlap between regions, but if the season is split regionally, that could result in higher participation in the south when the north is closed, which could reduce the realized harvest reductions. For consistency with previous management, the 58 bridge was chosen as the demarcation line between the northern and southern regions. This separation aligns well with the regional analysis conducted and with regional differences observed in the striped mullet fishery. The DMF recommends a 20 to 33% reduction, which can be achieved by option 1 or 2 to exceed the threshold and either meet or approach the target. This reduction level increases the probability of, at a minimum, ending overfishing, even if there is variability in fishing effort, market demand, striped mullet availability to the fishery, or recruitment. If a regional split is preferred, DMF recommends option 4, a season closure beginning October 28th in the northern region and beginning October 30th in the southern region, or option 5, a season closure beginning November 7th in the northern region and beginning November 10th in the southern region. The MSC action today is to vote on adoption of Supplement A to the striped mullet FMP. The next steps are, if Supplement A to the striped mullet FMP is adopted, the season closure will be implemented in 2023 via proclamation authority of the DMF director and will remain in place until adoption of Amendment 2. The DMF will continue development of Amendment 2 to the striped mullet FMP to fully explore all management options and address long-term sustainability and management of the striped mullet stock. Amendment 2 is tentatively scheduled for adoption in 2024. And with that, I will take any questions.
Questions? Commissioner Rader.
That really helped a lot. Thanks, folks. I understand that there were some samples of larger fish taken during the harvest season last fall, and just wonder if those were processed and analyzed, and whether those results have been factored into the department's recommendation about this here.
Yes, so those samples have been processed and analyzed. So we put together some catch at age data for the commercial catch. We just have 2018 to 2022 as an example. As Jeff mentioned earlier in the presentation, the fishery is very recruitment driven. So the fishery is primarily driven by good year classes that are delayed by 2 years. The fishery is primarily age 2 fish. So in 2018, you see the fishery was actually predominantly age 1. That's a kind of a first indication that there was some good year classes coming through. But then in 2021, it went back to being primarily driven by age 2 fish. In 2022, again, it was primarily driven by age 2 fish. We did see some indication that there was a higher percentage of age 3 fish in there, but still, it's primarily age 2 fish that we're seeing.
So you're interpreting that as the movement of a year class, a more successful recruitment class through the fishery in 1, 2, 3. So even the largest fish that were brought in were no older than age 3? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So yeah, if you look at the figures here, like even in 2022, we don't see hardly anything after age 3.
Others?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me. Yeah. Others? Anybody? Commissioner Roller?
So this, the mullet fishery is interesting to me because I think it's a multi-species fishery, right? And with southern flounder being shut down, I feel that effort is shifting into this fishery. And I don't think that we can quantify that in data, but we have seen the red drum fishery shift from a flounder net fishery, the commercial fishery, to a strike net fishery, predominantly, correct? Are you seeing that reflected in any of the trip data? Like there seems to be like more fishermen going to this fishery?
So participation has been pretty steady in recent years. There was a slight uptick in '21, but number of trips has increased significantly. I don't know if that means that it doesn't necessarily mean that people are moving from another fishery, but there definitely was more effort in '21. I'm not sure about '22.
Okay. Other questions? Commissioner Rader?
I do have another unfair question. That's my speciality. So, and I understand that this would require, to answer it specifically, would require updating or rerunning the model. But I'm trying to understand whether either increases in age structure or fecundity at age based on the prevalence of those fish would be likely to change the outputs in terms of relative F and relative B or SSB. I mean, my instinct is no, based on the fact that the max age is, what, 12 to 14? Is that right? And so you still got an severely age truncated structure regardless. And so is there any reason to think scientifically, given the strength of the stock assessment and its peer review, that those differences would give a different outcome in the stock assessment were it to have been redone? That's why it's an unfair question. But in other words, are these big differences, or it doesn't feel to me like they are?
Yeah, so you're right. We would have to update the stock assessment to really get a good answer for that. My thinking is that, what we've seen in the fishery currently is pretty consistent with what we've seen historically. So like the fact that we've seen some of these older fish in 2022, I don't anticipate that would change anything related to the overfishing status or the SSB magnitude, particularly as it relates to the fishing mortality, because we're still like exploiting one age class primarily and pretty heavily still.
And F is way higher than the threshold, the target or the threshold. Okay, and that's enough. I don't need to dive down that rabbit hole. Thanks for that.
Okay. You act like you wanted to add something. Are you good?
I was just going to say, in terms of the age structure, we don't really have information on what a virgin stock would look like. We don't know what age structure we're looking for, but I'm pretty confident it would be a much more drastic change than a few more age 3s to show improvement in the age structure of the fishery.
I guess I do have a follow-up.
Okay.
So just to clarify for the commission, we won't have any of that information as the amendment goes forward, right? So this is what this is the stock assessment information that we have.
This is what we have to deal with.
Right. So So even if this fall there is perhaps the year class strength continues through, it hasn't been hit, and a few age 4 fish come up, we still won't have that information quantified in terms of changing models, right? That's correct, right? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that is correct. I will add that, like, when we've done stock projections, even with moderate levels of harvest reduction, like in the range that we've recommended, if we get good recruitment for a couple of years in a row, the stock recovers pretty quickly. And that's why we think it's imperative to take some type of action now to start jump-starting that process.
Commissioner Cross.
I know that landings are only a component of the stock assessment and what y'all come up with, but it seems like we're always chasing the 8 ball. We're working off the 2019 stock assessment now, is that correct? And, you know, I don't know if there is a way, I mean, Doug may know better than I do, but I mean, it seems like to me that there should be a way to add current landings of the years afterwards as a component. Like in our particular case, next year, we're going to still be working off the same data on the amendment. So it looks like to me that there should be some way as a component to add in landings in that equation that kind of try to bring you to an updated status, because, I mean, we see what capture was last year. I don't know that that means anything either way, but I mean, I just feel like that when you're seeing this is what the public is seeing, greater landings, and I'm just wondering, is there a way to add that as a component to the updated information we might look at next year?
So we've heard time and again some confusion about how the commercial landings are used. They're only used to inform us about removals from the fishery. In order to conduct the stock assessment, we need all of our index data. We need all of our biological data in terms of ages, age at length, our juvenile abundance. All of those components need to be updated to update the model. And because of that gap in 2020, there is a significant issue with updating the index too soon. I think we're looking at about 5 years of data before we want to update it, I think is what we discussed.
Just a quick follow, and I understand that. I understand exactly what you're saying, but here and again, we're going to be deciding on an amendment next year, not an amendment, but a future FMP next year based off of a 5-year-old stock status report instead of the year prior. And that seems like we chase that a lot.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to Commissioner?
Sure,
Cross?
Commissioner Rader.
I actually don't know how we do that without much better resourcing the entire program. I mean, if we all had our druthers, as I know you would, we would have year-to-year updates with programs that supported both the data collection, processing, and analysis, and we don't have that. So maybe we can commit ourselves to working on the political side. I don't mind now. I'm retired, so I can become a politician on your or our behalf together, but to try to get those resources dedicated at each level. But in addition, I do think there's another test which has to do with the way the model behaves for the range of values that it's experiencing, and the technical tools that are used relate to sensitivity analyses. But basically, it's can you falsify the model and show that it's performing badly if the values are outside the range that you subjected it to? And so one can inspect the individual data streams and see if there are discrepant values. And then the question becomes, does the existing sensitivity test, the way that you've pressure tested the model, account for those values or not? In other words, what would it take to show that the model actually isn't behaving the way it should under current conditions? And so I've read the stock assessment finally, 180 pages, but what I haven't done is actually looked into that. And I don't know if staff experts have an opinion about the degree to which the current sensitivity and other model protocol testing approaches allow something like that. And I'm not trying to, I'm saying what we could do is create an expectation, for instance, that if things were really getting better and the age structure was improving, et cetera, then you would expect to see more of those, and that would be an expectation that could be tested against what happens this fall, for instance. And that might provide more information going into the amendment. So, but I don't, am I wrong about any of that? If I am, call it out, please.
So I'm not entirely sure I understood exactly what you're saying. But I will say that we did a number of sensitivity runs as part of the stock assessment process. And those were ones that we did on our own, but then ones that were recommended by the peer reviewers as well. And they,
And peer reviewed, right?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And they felt the model was very strong to those sensitivity runs that were done. I just wanted to also, if I
No,
can jump back
my
to-
reason for belaboring it actually isn't just striped mullet, and that is that we're going to see more and more of this, whereas these systems change through time, there'll be more ups and downs and faster changes and compensations one species to another, and people fishing on things as those compensations occur. And so we need to begin pressure testing ourselves and our systems to be able to respond to that. So maybe we can use this as Amendment 1. As a process to think through how we might do that more.
If you don't mind, can I
Yes,
jump back
please.
to what Commissioner Cross was addressing? So you were saying, you were expressing concern about the delay between the terminal year of the stock assessment and by the time we're able to actually do anything. We have heard those concerns a lot, and we absolutely agree with them. Like, we have that same concern with how we're able to conduct our management as well. That's one of the reasons that we felt this supplement was needed, because of the delay between the terminal year of the assessment and when we would actually be able to put in place Amendment 2 to address the stock status from the stock assessment. We look at the supplement as addressing that poor stock status immediately. In the future, as part of Amendment 2, we're really looking at adaptive management so that we can close that gap between stock assessment results and when we're actually able to take any management to address those results.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments? If not, the chair would entertain a motion. You got a comment? Go ahead, Commissioner Roller.
Yeah, I thought we were still in the question stage, right? So I just
That's why I
think
asked.
there's some things that need to be said, and I might monologue here for a couple minutes. My apologies. But first of all, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you, Jeff, Dan, Willow. Thank you for your hard work and for your patience and for giving this presentation for what, for me, particularly at the AC level, feels like the 100th time. So thank you, guys. We've been through some very difficult discussions here at the commission over the years, not just in my tenure, but in the tenures of people before. And that last meeting for me was a low point. I was very frustrated because after passing unanimous motion in November, we failed to pass a motion last time. And I understand there were concerns, but I was surprised by that, and I was disappointed because I feel that we have a duty to manage this resource for everybody and rebuild overfished stocks. I felt a lot of the criticisms, particularly of the P915 program, were really unfair. Particularly experiencing that program firsthand, I'm very impressed of it as a scientific sampling and the way it's used in the stock assessment process. And the same thing goes for some of the criticisms of the assessment, which I think were hashed out ad nauseum, particularly here and at the advisory committee level. I just feel that this discussion feels so much to me like Southern flounder, not just recently, but over the last 20 years. I feel that this discussion sounds a lot like some of the commission discussions in the mid-2000s, where we were presented with an increasing effort on an overfished stock, and the commission failed to take action at that period of time. I feel like the discussions regarding the supplement remind me of the flounder supplement. In fact, if you go and look at some of the public comments from that 2014-15 period, the public comments, and you just cross out Southern flounder, right in mullet, they sound like the same comments. We don't think it's the necessary time. Let's wait. Let's do an amendment. Well, we all know how that worked out, and we took much larger reductions. And I go back to Jeff's quote, larger reductions in the future if we don't take action now. And that's what I'm afraid of here if we don't do anything. And I think it's important to point out that going forward with the supplement is no small ask. This is a big deal at the division where you guys all get together and decide, hey, we need to do this for a rationale, and then we ask the department secretary to approve it. And so when we get to this point, I believe it is an emergency measure and something that we need to do to end overfishing. I appreciate you bringing the new options forward. I think that's great. I think they do address some concern. I know they're not going to give people the time of which they want to fish, but I think that we need to look at southern flounder. We had a lot of days to fish 10, 15, 20 years ago. We don't have that many days left now, and if this fishery is that important like it seems, I think that we need to do more to protect it in the future and to try to figure out how to manage it. You know, when we heard these comments, I saw in the NCFA newsletter, and we heard comments, public comment saying, this is only going to cost fishermen $1,200, and like that's a wrong statement. I'm kind of surprised that was even brought up, and what I mean is, this fishery's never totally made sense to me because there's a lot of part-time fishermen in it and people that just fish a few weekends in the fall. And that's what you get when you have a lot of participation. It's something we've discussed a lot of times. But anyway, I digress. So with that, if the chair would allow, I'll make a motion.
I will definitely allow you to make a motion.
I move that we select option 4.
Okay, please pull option 4 up for us, please.
I'll second that.
By Commissioner. Okay, is everybody clear on the closures involved with option 4 and the reduction it's projected to give us?
Point of clarification.
Please.
This is a DMF-approved option, correct?
There's been a motion, a second. Discussion, Commissioner Cross. Okay. Hold on. Is there any discussion on this part? Okay, Commissioner Cross.
I'd like to offer a substitute motion, Mr. Chairman. I move we go with option 6.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Huggins.
Point of order?
Yes.
This would require supermajority to pass, correct?
No,
It will not?
no. Because we're not going against any of the division's recommendations.
Are all of these division recommendations?
Yeah, they are. They're not?
The division's recommendations were options 1 and 2, or 4 and 5.
Chair?
Yes.
So what is the decision? Does this require a supermajority since it's not a division?
That's what
Okay.
we're working on. There's a difference between being recommended and preferred. So which of these options do you recommend we consider? any of these?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Please, go right
I
ahead.
had understood that all of those options
Please pull those options back up.
were options that would address overfishing through the supplement, even if the staff preferred it to be a higher rate, correct?
Yes, that is correct. All of these options would address overfishing, correct? Yeah.
Okay, we are on the simple majority at this point on these motions. Okay, all right. Okay, there has been a substitute motion placed forward and second, and may we see the motion, please?
Chair.
Yes, Laura.
At the back of your striped mullet decision document, all of the options are laid out so that we don't have to keep switching back if you want to refer to
Thank you.
that.
Commissioner Cross.
The motion is correct. I'd like to make an addition to it because I was just rattling off just for 1 year. The amendment to be placed for 1 year. Or I'm sorry, not the amendment, but the
Supplement.
supplement, yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay, yes.
I'd like to
Commissioner McNeil.
offer another substitute motion, if possible. Point of clarification, on the first substitute motion was seconded by Commissioner Huggins, not myself. So I just wanted to clear.
Did you second the
clear that up.
addition, the amendment to number 2? Okay, fine, all right, for 1 year, yeah, okay. So don't. The others. You can substitute twice, is that it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Y'all give me just. Commissioner McNeil, I understand you want to offer an amendment to the substitute motion.
Sure.
Okay.
That's right.
Please do. Yes, ma'am.
If I could just real quick, just say that Commissioner Cross's motion to amend for 1 year, the statute speaking to the supplement specifically says that the supplement remains in place until the amendment is adopted.
And we just had that discussion, and I'll let Counselor.
A supplement lasts no longer than the next FMP, but it doesn't prohibit the commission from putting conditions on the supplement to end sooner or to authorize it for a shorter period of time. In other words, the length of the supplement is prescribed, has outer boundaries, so it stays in place until the next one, but it doesn't mean that the commission's not allowed to condition the supplement on something that it feels is necessary to limit it to 1 year. It just means that after 1 year, it stops. So in other words, I think if I understood Commissioner or Vice Chair Cross's intent is, the intent is to allow the supplement to last for 1 year while the FMP continues to be developed. And I don't know if the intent is to say if you want further authorization, you have to come back, or if it's just this and this only. You have a motion to amend the substitute motion on the floor.
Yes. You're good? Okay, all right, fine. We have an amendment. We have a motion to amend the substitute motion from Ms. McNeil. Would you?
I actually wanted to do a substitute on this sub-motion.
We need to call it an amendment to the substitute motion.
Okay, well, if I want to amend it, then I would refer to approve option 5.
Okay, so you're saying to get rid of option 6, the way you want to amend it is to get rid of option 6 and go with option 5.
Yes, sir.
That's not an amendment. Well, I guess
It is.
an amendment to option 5. Actually, 3 times.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, all right, yes, that's needed, yes, thank you. Okay. We have an amended substitute motion to go with option, which one's 5? 5, okay. Okay. All right, it's been duly seconded. Discussion. Commissioner Rader.
I just want, for the record, and particularly as this then feeds into the discussion about Amendment 2, to note that these, and in fact, the document says minimum reduction, and in my view, those are actually maximum reductions that would be achieved by those seasons, because that does not take into account the displacement of effort in time or space. And almost always, you end up having people doing what's legal and ending up reducing the reduction expected. So in that sense, you know, we would not, I don't think we'll actually achieve those reductions that are shown on that side. It'll be discounted by that, by some amount. So almost certainly. The other thing is I'm not sure that we have fully recognized the cost to the industry there, because the cost, the value that they get back is affected by the density or the fish harvest, the gluts, and also which reduces the price there, and also the availability of infrastructure, cutters, and other things. So it's just, those are important things to consider as we move into Amendment 2. And I personally am not a fan of seasons as a tool to achieve reductions obligated in this way. I will vote for those here because I think that's the choices we have. Doing something's important. I just don't think we should expect to see the reductions that are laid out in the paper.
Was your intention to leave the 1 year in there?
I don't think the 1 year is necessary if the supplement goes away once the FMP is approved, right?
Okay,
So I'm fine with taking that out.
so you're taking out the 1 year.
Yes.
Okay,
By replacing option 6 with option 5 and striking the language limiting the supplement to 1 year.
Correct.
That's your amendment to the substitute.
Yes, sir.
okay, all right, good. Commissioner Roller?
Thank you for your second, Commissioner Gardner. Proud that you beat me to it. I support this motion. I support options, I'm doing the math in my head. I support options 5 or 6, which goes back to my comments the last time. Which ones? 1, 2, 3, I'm doing the math in my head. Going back to my motion. I support the first motion that I made, and I support option 5, right? I think that these reductions are necessary. I don't believe that option 6 goes far enough, just like I don't believe that option 3 goes far enough. Going back to the conversations and discussion at the last meeting, we had that motion, and I spoke out and said that I only supported that because this commission had not supported the other options, right? So I'm fully in support of either one of these options, as I think that they do enough to get us to end overfishing.
Right. Further discussion? Commissioner Blanton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to remind the commission that this is a temporary management option that started out as a temporary management option, and it was not meant to cut the knees right out from up underneath the fishermen in just one fell swoop. Now, we've heard from the fishermen, and there is a roe fishery, and it's not exclusive to the state of North Carolina. Quite a few states offer a roe fishery. Florida, Louisiana, that it occurs. Now, I'd like to remind and offer some comment about my opinion to the upper ferry line closures, which might be quite a bit different from what the division's opinion could be. But there is a closure in probably the most densely populated place in the state where roe mullets gather and spend their summertime. I can only imagine that by the mullets being left alone for the period of time that they dwell there, that they have a fairly increased chance of getting out of that area and getting back through to the spawning grounds. And I can't imagine that there is not going to be a benefit to that. The amendment process is coming up, which will gather more fishermen, more input, and more options to be brought back to this very table to be entertained. I think by this supplement and by the action of the commission, we should take an action, but not an action that will absolutely crucify the fishermen. Now, let me outline something. Option 3 or 6 takes 45 days away from fishermen at the moment. If you look, there's only a handful of days, 6 or 8 day difference between the options, which equates to some percentage, but what percentage is based on historical data over a long range. We cannot absolutely predict what's going to happen in 2023. There could be a hurricane about that time and take the whole fishery out altogether. Or it could be a perfect season and everything go just right. It could go either way. But as I see it right now, we're taking at least 45 to 50 days away easily. And these much-needed 6 or 7 days that could come into play could be very beneficial to the fishermen at the moment when they need it. And still giving taking some pressure off of the fish. So I can't understand or fathom why we would take and try to do the most extreme measure at the moment, when we've just been asked to give some temporary relief until we can get to the more major discussions that are going to take place through the amendment process. Now, believe me, it is tough to be in the industry and to make these decisions. However, by looking at the data, by having discussions, and by listening diligently and carefully through this, that the stock assessment is pretty strong, and it's been fairly debated, and I've had discussions to the side about this. You know, we absolutely do need to take an action, but we do not need to cripple the industry, because timing within the fishery, the roe fishery altogether, or more specifically, excuse me, is very crucial. And a handful of days could be the benefit or the detriment of a fisherman. And I can attest to you, being from the north part of the state and into Albemarle Sound, the fishermen in December up there are going to suffer from not having mullets in December. I can promise you that. So this is going to have widespread effects and consequences. And these fishermen are not going to have the mullets to fish on until they get them back in January. So we can make motion after motion after motion, but what makes sense the most is to take the lighter step, move on from it, allow the amendment process to go through, allow the AC to assemble, and bring us back options that would more equitably and fairly distribute these fish out and offer probably a higher level of protection. But to me, it's not fair to go for the most robust option here at the moment, because an action now is an action that we haven't taken in the past. And all the actions in here are going to take at least 45 days away from these fishermen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further comments? Okay, there being none, where we are to get to where we need to be is going to take several steps, so just be a little bit patient with me if y'all would. Right now, we're going to be voting on the amendment to substitute, on the substitute motion. So let's do a roll call vote to vote for the amendment to the substitute motion.
Yes, Chair. Commissioner Cross?
Nay.
Thank you. Commissioner Blanton?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Gardner? Thank you. Commissioner Huggins?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner McNeil?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Rader?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Roller?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Shellum?
Aye.
And me?
Oh, sorry. So it looks 5-4, 5-3. Oh, Chairman Bizzle.
He
I'm
hadn't
so
voted for
sorry.
me yet, yeah. Call my name. You forgot about me already.
I'm ready. I promise. Thank you, sir.
Okay, motion passes, was that 6-3? Yes. Okay. Now what we are needing to vote on is the substitute motion as amended. So let's take a vote on the substitute motion as amended. Roll
Yes,
call.
Chair.
I'm sorry, point of order. Can you read the new motion that we're voting on?
Okay, that's it, right? Yes, it's Ms. McNeil's motion. It's amendment to pick option 5 with no year time limit. Okay? Everybody understand the motion that we're voting on right now?
Could you read the motion that we're voting on?
Okay. You can read it, see if you can read it. Your eyes are better than mine.
If I may,
To the main motion.
the amendment,
Any other questions or discussions on this motion? If not, let's do a roll call, please.
Yes, Chair. Commissioner Cross?
Nay.
Thank you. Commissioner Blanton?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Gardner? Thank you. Commissioner Huggins? Thank you. Commissioner McNeil?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Rader?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Roller?
Aye.
Thank you. And Commissioner Shellham?
Aye.
Thank you.
You did it
And
again.
Chairman Bizzle?
Okay. Aye. Motion passes 6-3. Now, we're going to,
Chairman,
yes.
The original question as substituted.
As substituted.
So the
That's-
so further amendments can be offered, but none that can be inconsistent with the substituted language.
Okay, all right. Any discussion on this?
I'm sorry,
Yes.
point of clarification, can you repeat that again, Mr. Counsel?
Certainly. So a substitute motion cannot be further amended such, if it passes, it cannot be further amended in a manner inconsistent with the substitute language. It does not necessarily mean that you cannot offer additional amendments to the substituted motion, not unlike what we saw earlier, but it just can't be inconsistent with it. So in other words, where you're at right now, no further amendments can be offered that would be inconsistent with adopting option 5 of supplement A to amendment 1.
No annual time.
With no annual time limit, or no one-year time limit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can't be inconsistent with option 5? Is that,
Right.
so no other options are available to be amended into it, and that's just a general question?
Yeah, not at this point, yes.
Correct, because there was a substitute motion that was offered, and then that substitute was amended, and that amendment to the substitute passed. The substitute as amended passed, so now you're back to the original question as substituted, which is option 5. So no further options can be offered, but other amendments could be offered, as long as they're not inconsistent with going with option 5.
Okay, we're clear on that, I'm sure. Okay, Commissioner Shellham.
My concern and sadness lies within the southern part of the state. I feel like moving forward with issues like this, and unfortunately, it will make it more complicated, but giving the north and the south, there's such different bodies of water to fish. I feel like we need to complicate things more, but really give that southern half I mean, that's where I fish, and I don't want to let my people down. But if we could break it up, I feel like it would be better and more fair in the future. I know we have to do something now, and that's why I voted.
Well, option 5 has the north begin on November, begin on November 7th, and the south on November 10th. So there's a little bit there. Yeah, okay. All right, sure. Commissioner Roller.
On Commissioner Shellham's point, she brings a good point. We hear this all the time, not just in mullet, but in most of our finfish as well as our shellfish fisheries, that particularly once you get New River South, it's a completely different habitat and ecosystem, and everything we do, all sort of fishing pressure, reflects very differently in our fisheries. So I think going forward, we do need to look at more regional management in general.
Point taken. Commissioner Rader.
And to both of those points, I think that's right. And I criticize the use of seasons before without offering options for further consideration during Amendment 2. And I do think that establishing numeric quotas based on the best available science and then dedicating those regionally and then keeping track of them as you would an asset in the bank and overseeing is a strategy we definitely should look at in this case. And that doesn't imply anything about tradability or any of the other boogeymen that people see when they hear about quotas, but simply trying to achieve the outcome we're trying to achieve while allowing the industry to make maximum profits from the amount that's consistent with the mortality schedule coming out of the stock assessments, to me, makes just plain and abundant sense. So I hope that we will look at other strategies besides season and area closures or season by area closures in that amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this motion, hopefully final motion? If, Commissioner Gardner, go.
This wouldn't go towards voting, but in my doing my homework and trying to get things right for my area and try to understand the fishery, it was brought to my attention that we haven't had a big turnout for the advisory committee for mullet. And that bothers me, and I don't know why, but I would love it. I'd be really happy to maybe have the opportunity to open that up so that maybe we could have more folks on the Striped Mullet Advisory Committee. I'm not sure why the turnout's not there, and I did some homework, and I found some names in the northern area that might be interested. But my biggest concern with this the whole time was that there just wasn't a lot of input. And I spent a lot of time reaching out, both in Carteret County and Dare County, because I'm by island. And I hope that helps the gentlemen that have showed up from the south in doing the work, the hard work that's going to come after the supplement.
Okay.
Thank you.
We probably need to move on to vote unless somebody has something about the motion. Yes.
Just agree with Commissioner Gardner on that, and I know that the division needs a scientist for that, so if anybody's listening, put your name in the hat.
Okay, good enough. All right, we'll talk about that under another line item somewhere. Okay, let us do, I would love to circle back, if we're talking about the ACs, let's circle back to that. Okay, Commissioner Shelton, did you have anything you needed to add about the motion?
I agree that.
About the motion?
Oh, so, no, yeah, never mind.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there be nothing else. Roll call vote on this, please. Does everybody understand what we're voting on? Okay. Roll call.
Commissioner Cross.
Nay.
Thank you. Commissioner Blanton.
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Gardner. Aye. Thank you. Commissioner Huggins.
No.
Thank you. Commissioner McNeil.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Rader.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Roller.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Shellum.
Aye.
And Chairman Bizzle.
Thank you. Aye. Motion passes 6-3, so we have us a supplement. Okay, you want to make a comment about the ACs while we're right here, if you would?
Yes, sir. Just real quick, so the announcement period for ACs for the Striped Mullet Fishery Management Plan has closed, and we do have a list of names. And I believe, to Commissioner Roller's point, it does include 2 scientists. So we have some scientists, some recreational folks, as well as some commercial folks. So I hope that we have not brought those names to Chairman Bizzle yet, but we're working on that. And so I think we've got some good potential AC members on there. So thank you for that.
And thank you for the concern on that. Do you have a comment, Commissioner Rowland?
I'm glad to hear that. I was going back to a week-old discussion with staff, so I'm glad that you got some good applications in. Fantastic.
Okay, yes, Commissioner Rader.
I just think it's critically important that we keep faith on the schedule for the amendment with the intent right now, just again to clarify in everybody's mind, is right now tentatively scheduled for May of #24, and that really must keep to that schedule in order to have fair and equitable consideration and science input and to be able to have, to inform the fall season of that year. So again, with the sense of the commission, I hope you'll take that into account, Director.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your work, your presentation. Y'all really have put in a yeoman's job here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Commission, for us getting a supplement in place. We are going to take, yes, sir. Commissioner Shield.
Regarding the subcommittees, it's hard to get our own people to show up, so that's been very frustrating to be alone,
Yeah.
and I don't like it. Let's do our jobs.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we got a little housekeeping stuff here to do, about a short 5-minute break, please, and we'll see y'all right back, and we'll get you out of here.
sir. Good morning. I'm Steve Poland, Fishery Management Section Chief, and today I'm going to briefly review the rule suspension memo located in your briefing materials and ask that you consider a new temporary rule suspension for MFC Rule 030-0501. So in accordance with DMF management policy and MFC rule and general statutes, the director may suspend in whole or in part any Marine Fisheries Commission rule that may be affected by variable conditions until the next meeting of the commission, at which time the MFC may vote to delegate to the director the authority to continue to suspend the rule. The MFC may vote to suspend the rule indefinitely for a fixed period of time or until external conditions change or established triggers occur. Following a vote by the Marine Fisheries Commission to suspend a rule, the division will update the Marine Fisheries Commission at each meeting with a memo detailing the current list of suspended rules and verbally review the list of suspended rules annually at every November meeting of the MFC. So before I go into the current rule suspension we're asking you to take action on today, I just wanted to point you to the memo, and there are 2 rule suspensions that are no longer in effect because rule changes that y'all approved, I guess, a year ago took effect, and we've rescinded 2 procs. So there's details of that in your memo. So for today, there's 1 rule suspension for y'all to consider as an action item. The director has suspended a portion of Rule 030-0501 titled Procedures and Requirements to Obtain Permits. Specifically, subsections 4 of Section E of the rule are suspended in Proclamation M11-2023. The suspension was needed to issue Proclamation SF5-2023, which creates the shellfish relocation permit that will allow the relocation of shellfish for protection purposes in an area close to harvest that would otherwise be destroyed due to maintenance, dredging, construction, or other development activity. The areas receiving the relocated shellfish will also be closed to harvest. The requirement to relocate shellfish will come as a condition in the Division of Coastal Management permit for a development activity. It is important to note that before one can be eligible to receive this permit, that they must first have a permit from DCM allowing the dredge and construction activity that would otherwise destroy the shellfish resource. The permitted activity will be done by dredge and construction outfits as part of the mitigating activities required by the DCM permit. The need for this suspension is to allow individuals who may not hold a standard or retired commercial fishing license and/or shellfish license to obtain the new permit in lieu of this requirement. So the division recommends that the Marine Fisheries Commission consider voting to suspend the aforementioned portions of Rule 030-0501 indefinitely. And I have provided draft motion language on the screen for your consideration, and I'm happy to take any questions. And that motion is coming. Yeah. Boom. It's taking a while for the electrons. There they are. So.
I'm enjoying the text of this rule.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay.
I move the language on the screen.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Commissioner Rader. Is there a second by somebody? Second, Commissioner Roller. Any discussion on this? If not, roll call vote. Let's do that. You have a question?
I just have a question. It might be dumb, but when I see people relocating oysters, they're often like right near the marina where I live, and it just really grosses me out. How long, when they relocate them, do they let them sit in that area? And are they in bags? Are they expected to roll off the edges of the oyster beds, or it just, it kind of freaks me out?
I'll preface my response with I'm absolutely not the right person to provide this response. But for this instance in particular, this is just to relocate oysters from a polluted area to another polluted area, a permanent polluted area. So in this case, that they would not be available to harvest because they'd be in those polluted areas. But as far as like
So-
how they're actually, like the mechanism of it, I'd have to ask.
How long are they sitting there to be harvestable again? And how do we know that they've been relocated? Because as a wild harvester, I go
Yeah.
everywhere.
Where's Jacob?
Just curious.
We got somebody that knows something now.
So, so behind you.
Thanks, Steve.
Oh, go ahead, you. It's, officially, it's a minimum of 21 days, and it's for what we call marginally polluted areas, or restricted areas, not the prohibited areas like directly in marinas. And we've done contaminant reduction studies to show that the fecal levels will, dissipate within that 21 days. But generally, it ends up being a lot more than 21, but a very minimum, and that's when the water temperatures are greater than 50 degrees, so that we're sure they're feeding and getting rid of the contaminants.
So you're only relocating when the water is cold?
No, we do it when it's warm, when it's
Okay.
higher.
So-
So May 1st, April 1st to May 15th. And
Okay.
that's for the polluted area relay, not the relocation permit.
So there's no way that I could pick them up? Because it's not oyster season, it starts October 15th. There's no way that I could harvest these relocated oysters to sell to my chefs?
Correct.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Okay. Good. All right. You may leave now.
Well, we don't
Steve?
know whether you're going into those places, and
I get in all the
I'm just kidding you.
Okay, all right. Good discussion. We've got a motion on the floor to do the rule suspension by Commissioner Rader, and I'm just looking for a second, I believe. Did I have a second? I did have a second. Roll, okay. All right, without any further discussion, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Yes, Chair. Commissioner Cross?
I'm going to abstain.
Thank you. Commissioner Blanton? Thank you. Commissioner Gardner? Thank you. Commissioner Huggins?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner McNeil?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Rader?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Roller?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Shellum?
Aye.
Thank you. And Chairman Bizzle?
Aye, motion passes without dissension. Thank you very much. Moving on into our rulemaking update, Catherine Bloom, our all-star.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yep, Steve and I came up together today, the tag team rules at large. So for those who don't know me, I'm Catherine Bloom. I'm the rulemaking coordinator for the division. And I'll start with my usual quick reminders just to set the stage for the commission. These are reminders about statutory requirements that affect your rulemaking. So first is General Statute 150B-21.3A, which is the periodic review and expiration of existing rules. And I bring this up at each meeting since 2017, which is when you began your readoption process. This law requires state agencies that implement rules to review existing rules at least once every 10 years in accordance with a prescribed process, and that includes rule readoption as if the rules were brand-new rules. So the commission has only one more package of rules to undertake to satisfy these requirements, and I'll be detailing that shortly. The second reminder is Session Law 2019-198 and North Carolina General Statute 14-4.1. And both of these laws require that any rule that creates a new criminal offense or otherwise subjects a person to criminal penalties is automatically subject to legislative review. And you have about 375 rules total, and about 1/3 of those are subject to these laws. And the punchline is these requirements add time to the rulemaking process. So just a couple reminders at the beginning that help make sense why these things take so long and all the steps that we try to guide you through. So in your briefing materials, there's a rulemaking section, and there's a cover memo at the beginning. And if you'd like to follow along, that's probably the easiest document to kind of keep pace with the different topics. So I'll give you just a minute if you want to flip to that. And so we have a total of 4 rulemaking actions before you today for your consideration. But before we get into those, I've got a couple of updates. First is the 2021-2022 rulemaking cycle, and in 2022, you gave final approval to 69 rules that were automatically subject to legislative review during the 2023 long session, and that session began January 11th. These rules covered various subjects, shellfish lease requirements, different things about crustacea and shellfish requirements, commercial blue crab harvest, and also permit and license suspensions and revocations. And the rules became effective March 15th, 2023. This was the 31st legislative day, so they had the automatic sort of default effective date. That was that 31st day, legislative day of the long session. And on that day, March 15th, the division issued a news release about those rules as well as a supplement to your rule book. So those actions completed the rulemaking process after quite a while. As I said, it takes 2 to 3 years to get through the process when we have that legislative review in addition to the other steps. But it's done. So you won't have to hear about that cycle anymore. Next up is the 2022-2023 rulemaking cycle, and at your last meeting in February, you gave final approval of 2 rules, mutilated finfish and marinas, docking facilities, and other mooring areas. So there's a table in your materials that shows the steps in the process, and one of the final steps in the rulemaking process is review by the Rules Review Commission, or RRC. And the RRC met last Thursday, so May 18th, and at that meeting, they did approve the marinas rule. So this rule will be effective next week, June 1st, and once again, the division will issue a news release and a supplement to your rule book about that rule. Now, approaching the May 18th RRC meeting, the Wildlife Resources Commission Chair submitted written comments to the RRC recommending objection to the mutilated finfish rule based on potential ambiguity about the Marine Fisheries Commission's jurisdiction in joint and coastal fishing waters. This issue was not able to be resolved in time for that May 18th meeting, so it will be on the June 15th RRC meeting agenda. And the mutilated finfish rule is automatically subject to legislative review, so an additional 1-month delay does not affect the timetable for that rule. And your council and division staff will continue to keep you updated about that rule since that will carry into June. So we'll keep you updated following that action. All right, that brings us to the current year's cycle, 2023-2024. And this cycle is scheduled to begin the formal process today at this meeting. And there's a table in your materials that show the steps for this year's cycle. There's also a fiscal analysis approved by the Office of State Budget and Management for each of the 4 subjects that are listed on your agenda. As I said at the outset of my update, in 2017, you began the process to readopt your about 375 rules. There's only 79 left, and they all pertain to shellfish plants and inspections. So the division has prepared these rules to begin rulemaking in time to meet that June 30th, 2024 rule readoption deadline. And the proposed rules for 3 other subjects are also included in this package, and I'll walk through those separately in just a minute. The proposed rules in this cycle would have an earliest effective date of April 1st, 2024, unless they are automatically subject to legislative review. Those could likely be reviewed in next year's short session. The timing will be close on the Rules Review Commission meeting. It has to get to the legislature in a certain period of time to be there for consideration in the short session, and we hope those will be included. We'll continue to keep you updated between now and then. All right, so the first of the 4 subjects is readoption of shellfish plant and inspection rules in 15A NCAC 18A 0300 through 0800. So pursuant to General Statute 150B 21.3A, this package of 85 rules, which includes the 79 readoptions that are left and 6 supporting rule changes, those rules are proposed for readoption, amendment, or repeal. And the changes would help ensure that North Carolina remains in full compliance with national requirements, provide efficiencies for the division in the process of implementing and enforcing those rules, and also clarify and update the rules for stakeholders. North Carolina is part of the National Shellfish Sanitation Program, or NSSP, and that's a federal and state cooperative program that's designed to promote and improve the sanitation of shellfish that are moving in interstate commerce. This is stated in the NSSP Guide for the Control of Molluscan Shellfish, otherwise known as the Guide. And I see Commissioner Shellham nodding her head. Division staff work together with representatives from other states, the federal government, and industry through the International Shellfish Sanitation Conference to develop guidelines for all state shellfish programs, and those are summarized in the guide. So North Carolina needs to meet those minimum standards that are included in the guide in order for North Carolina shellfish to be able to be sold through interstate commerce. And also that protects the consumers of those North Carolina shellfish, both within and outside of the state. The requirements are already being enforced by the division consistent with the guide. Overall, the rules are expected to increase consumer confidence in the safety of North Carolina shellfish products, as well as achieve efficiencies in implementing and enforcing the rules, and then clarify requirements for stakeholders. So as I mentioned, there's additional rules in this package for other topics, and these should sound familiar to you. At your last meeting, we came to you and asked for your preferred management options and the associated language for rulemaking. So if you feel like you already did this before, the last step was what we needed in order to make these final preparations with the fiscal analysis, and now today is the first formal step under the Administrative Procedure Act to begin the rulemaking process. So it's not Groundhog Day, I promise. All right, so the first of these 3 additional subjects is data collection and harassment prevention for the conservation of marine and estuarine resources. The division has seen the increasing occurrence and severity of harassment during data collection initiatives and decreasing participation in these programs. So amendments are proposed to 5 of your rules to set requirements to address harassment of division employees by any person engaged in regulated fishing activity, not just licensees, that occurs in the process of obtaining data for the conservation of marine and estuarine resources and data for the protection of public health related to those public health programs that fall under the authority of the Commission. Additional amendments more fully characterize the kinds of data that may be collected. The amendments would support the importance of participation by persons engaged in regulated fishing activity in those division data collection programs, whether they personally hold a license or not. Data collected from the commercial and recreational fishing sectors are essential in fisheries management for the state and play a vital role in interstate and federal fisheries management as well. The changes would also provide a safer working environment for division employees by broadening the scope of enforceability to enhance protections for division employees as they collect that data. Such protections not only enhance the division's data collection efforts, but improve our ability to provide a workplace that is free from unlawful harassment, which typically leads to higher employee satisfaction, lower turnover, and better recruitment of staff for the agency. All right, the next subject is oyster sanctuary rule changes, and proposed amendments would add the boundaries of our 2 newest oyster sanctuaries, as well as correct boundaries for 3 other sanctuaries. And that's where published coordinates we recently found were inconsistent with the permitted and marked boundaries. So it's a paper exercise. The sanctuaries themselves are in good shape. So the changes to the rule would provide permanent protection in rule for oysters from bottom disturbing gear so that the sites can serve their intended management function as oyster broodstock sanctuaries, as well as safeguard boaters that are navigating the sanctuaries. Now, the changes are already in place via the Fishery Director's Proclamation Authority. The changes here proposed would put those changes in the permanent rule. Additionally, there are coordinates for 3 other sanctuaries that are proposed to be reorganized to standardize the cardinal directions. So there's no changes to those 3 sanctuaries or the coordinate pairs. We're just putting them in the same sequence so that the whole rule reads consistently. But when you look at it, it looks like there's a lot of changes. Those are just moving the chairs around, essentially. And the final subject is conforming rule changes for the Shellfish Relay Program and shellfish leases and franchises. In 2021, the division began the process of discontinuing its Shellfish Relay Program, and this was due primarily to insufficient resources for us to run the program, as well as lack of widespread use. The Shellfish Relay Program will end effective May of next year, and you received information about the discontinuation of this program at your February meeting in 2022, as well as an update from the program head at your February meeting this year. So the division has identified 11 rules in total related to that shellfish relay program that set specific requirements of relaying shellfish from certain polluted areas. And so the changes are proposed to amend the portions of rules that have those requirements, or in some cases, outright repeal a rule when it's only about that activity. And those would then remove those requirements from the North Carolina Administrative Code, and that's consistent with rulemaking requirements under the Administrative Procedure Act. So essentially, it's a housekeeping exercise. We're going to take those requirements off the books that are no longer valid as of next May. Additional proposed changes for shellfish leases and franchise requirements are proposed to a single rule, which is 15A NCAC 030-0201, and that would conform that rule to requirements of Session Law 2019-37, which you've heard about many times. That was an act to provide further support to the shellfish aquaculture industry, and it had several sections, various requirements. Section 3 of the act increased production and planning requirements for shellfish leases and franchises, and a subsection of that requires that you amend the rule I mentioned consistent with those new shellfish production and planning requirements for any leases that were granted July 1, 2019 and forward. And so the changes in the rule conform the rule to that law. So the action scheduled for the commission today is vote on notice of text for rulemaking for this package of 103 rules in total. And the vote includes not only the proposed rules, but also the OSBM-approved fiscal analyses of those rules. It would begin the rulemaking process, which includes a public comment period and a public hearing that will be held later this year. And the action items, Mr. Chairman, can be taken up as a complete package or individually, however you see fit. And I think Paula is prepared either way to accommodate what the commission would like to do. I'm glad to address any questions you have, but other than the scheduled vote, that does conclude the rulemaking update. Thank you,
Great.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Great job as usual. Let's do this as a total package. Okay, Commissioner Roller.
I would like to move that we, let's see the language here. Move to approve the notice of text for rulemaking, and I hope I don't have to read all of those.
Yes, you do. No, you don't. Okay, motion made by Commissioner Roller. Second. Commissioner Huggins. Further discussion on anything? Yes, sir.
I'm just happy to see this package. In particular, I know we talked about this last time, but the data collection harassment prevention for the employees is very near and dear to my heart, so I'm really glad to see this, and I'm really happy to have my name on this motion. So.
Yeah, as always, there's some good stuff in these rules, but this is particularly interesting to me, particularly. Anybody else? Okay, let's do a roll call vote. If we're going this far, let's do it.
All right. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll track it. Commissioner Cross?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Blanton?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Gardner? Thank you. Commissioner Huggins? Thank you. Commissioner McNeil?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Rader?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Roller?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Shellum?
Aye.
Thank you. And Chairman Bissell?
Aye. Motion
Thank you.
passes unanimously. Great. Catherine, thank you again, and thanks, staff. Okay, we're getting in short rows. Commissioner Shellum.
So I just have a general question. After our presentation yesterday with Claire with the Marsh Forward,
Yes.
I feel like oyster farmers and oyster growers are really doing a lot to benefit our state. And is that helping those wetlands? I just would like to share my appreciation for what they're doing. I think the water is clearer than it ever has been in my area, and that's due to a lot of new oysters, and I appreciate their work. And I'm worried about them in the future with what she shared with us yesterday. I'm sorry, yeah. So anyway, I feel like those oyster farms are a big benefit to our wetlands. And I know that's coming up in discussion. I just wanted to say that, that's all.
Absolutely, no problem. And that kind of segues us over into issues from commissioners. Any commissioner have anything they want to bring up? Commissioner Roller.
Thank you, Chair. I've got several things I want to bring up just to see that we could look at in the future. First of all, I did neglect to specifically mention something in the speckled trout conversation yesterday. I know it was covered, but there was a lot of support for looking at eliminating captain and crew limits for speckled trout. One of the things I'd be interested in hearing the division's feedback in is this something that we should look at on an FMP by FMP basis, or was this something that could be looked at through rulemaking to allow the director more broad proclamation authority over over multiple species that we manage? On that same note, I think I'd be interested in looking at unregulated recreational species like Atlantic bonito to see if there's any room to do any sort of like just general bag limit for the recreational side, or if there's anything else that might fall into that category that's mostly caught in state waters. In addition, there's been a lot of discussion. We heard this at the for hire meetings looking at black drum and sheep's head bag limits in particular. A lot of people think that they're too high, and we don't really manage those through direct FMPs, so it'd be interesting to see if we should look at any updates to that. I think back to the original discussions with black drum in particular, which I was involved in as a citizen. North Carolina was one of the only states in their range that didn't have a bag limit or size limit. And when we put them into place, I remember it was Commissioner Joe Shute at the time made the motion for 10 fish, which many of us felt was a little bit high. And I know that sometimes you gotta start somewhere and move down, but that was about a decade. And I still think we're sort of like, when it comes to that fish, we're not really comparable to our other fellow states, right? Like most states are 5 or fish or less, and I think Georgia's about the same, but Georgia's limits I don't really agree with in general. So, but it'd be interested to look at some of that. And again, I'm talking about the recreational side of things, to be clear.
Okay, great. Commissioner Blanton, did you have something that you want to bring up?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to talk about a rule, we approved a set of rules through the last rule cycle, and a rule about the identifying marks, I guess, on buoys was looked at by the division and tweaked, I would probably just say, just a little bit. And when the March 15th press release came out, it was realized by fishermen, particularly crabbers, that the rule had changed for the identifying marks on a crab pot buoy or a pot buoy, I think more specifically in the rule. So we started investigating a little bit and asking questions of the division and trying to realize where this particularly came from. And, we had just worked on the blue crab FMP, and I didn't remember any discussions there. And so basically what happened, and Catherine, I've spoke with her more, is that she compared the POTS identifying rule to the other rules identifying other markings for other gears. And basically she streamlined the pot marking rule to sort of reflect of the other rules of the other markings for other gears. Well, the industry reached back out to me particularly, and other leadership in the industry with discrepancies of the rule change. And so I started speaking with the director about the issues the fishermen had with the particular rule change of the pot identifier. And not to speak for the director or anyone at the division, but she asked me to bring this issue back in the session here so that it could be further investigated by the commission, being that we're the rulemaking body. And so I'm going to offer a motion. Hopefully it's nothing controversial. This just would allow us to reinvestigate the rule, allow council to help us reinvestigate this rule to try and get it a little more appealing, I guess you could say, to the fishermen for ease of use and ease of identification. And once I offer the motion, I'll try to discuss and then get a second. I'll just try to make a few more comments as to why I'm offering it. So I move that the commission authorize staff to proceed with the necessary rulemaking steps related to 15A NCAC 03J dot 0301C to remove or otherwise address the overlapping pot identification requirements unintentionally created by the most recent rule amendment. And that would be as soon as possible.
Commissioner Shellham seconds that.
Okay, fantastic.
And if I could offer a few more comments,
Go right
Mr.
ahead,
Chairman.
please.
So every piece of commercial gear has to be marked. I think we all understand that. In particular, crab pots are not few, but are many. And so there are crabbers out there that have quite a bit of gear. And so to mark that gear, it takes quite a bit of time, effort, money, and so forth. And so when you have to mark, and I'm going to give just an example of 1,000 crab pots in combination of any type, whether it be hard crab pots, peeler pots, or such, a fisherman has known to own that much gear. And so in the particular rule change, it asks for the buoy to be marked by the name, initials and last name, and the vessel registration number. Well, nothing says that a fisherman can't sell his vessel and buy another one. And so by marking the buoy with the vessel ID and the name, it would require some fishermen to go back and do quite a bit of extensive labor to do that. Now, if the fisherman so chooses to sell his vessel but keep his pots, he would have to go then and change every marking on every buoy to match that vessel ID that he now owns again. And so the industry asked for us to sort of do away with that and mark by name at the top of the list to make sure that, yes, the name is on the buoy of the owner and not both, because I think at one point it was either or. And what changed in the language was the or to an and. And so the language changed. It said you have to have your name and your vessel ID. And so instead of the previous language, the name or the vessel ID, which allowed the fisherman to choose one or the other and not have to have both identifiers. And I think the concern with the industry is that your name is sufficient enough on that you're the owner of that gear, and that the vessel may not necessarily be necessary, for lack of a better term, to have in addition to. Now, I just want this rule brought back for discussion. If the commission feels any differently, if Marine Patrol feels any differently, upon discussions, we may not choose to change it. But I would like it rediscussed by the commission, and that's why I offered the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Personally, I see this as a reasonable request. Anybody has any input, any discussion that you want to have on this? Director?
Yeah, I would just say I've talked to Commissioner Blanton about this, and the division supports looking at this. We don't have any issues with that.
Very good. Commissioner Roller?
Very reasonable, and I just point out that this is why we have stakeholders on these commissions.
Absolutely. All right. No other further discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, Chair. Commissioner Cross?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Blanton?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Gardner? Thank you. Commissioner Huggins?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner McNeil?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Rader?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Roller?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Shellum?
Aye.
Thank you. And Chairman Bizzle?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for bringing this up to our attention. Okay. Further issues from commissioners. Anybody have anything else they want to be brought up at this time? Commissioner Cross.
I got a couple of things real quick. One of them pertains to red drum. I mean, we're in a situation right now with the crab stock that we've got so many red drum, the predation on the crab stock is causing huge issues. I mean, it just is. And I'd like the director to look into increasing the bag limit for the wreck side of red drum and the commercial harvest slightly. I mean, I've been told there's a 2-inch variance in the slot that would create 3 fish. Is that correct? Moving it one way or the other on the slot for recreational side. I'm not positive, but that's number one. And number two, and I think division's going to already be looking at this anyway, but I think we need to direct a look at a proclamation for a moratorium on striped bass effort on the spawning grounds in the upper Roanoke River and also above the ferry lines in the Neuse and the Pamlico rivers. Thank you.
Anything else from anybody? Yes.
I had asked in previous meetings to look at the feasibility of trying to enforce South Atlantic for hire permits. I was just curious if that had been discussed in any capacity or if we will look at bringing that in the future. And just my plug that given our lack of joint enforcement in this state, I believe that our inability to enforce that is putting a valuable industry potentially at risk.
Yes, so just as a response, we are working on that, and we've basically formed a team, including Chris Savage, who's helping us work through that.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, great. Anything else from anybody? If not, Laura, would you recap our meeting assignments, please?
I would love to. All right. Thank you, Chairman Bizzle. So on Thursday, you reviewed and approved the Spotted Sea Trout Fishery Management Plan Goal and Objectives. And as Lucas reviewed yesterday during his presentation, now that those are approved, staff are going to be working on developing that fishery management plan. And they will be reviewing all of the public comment that we have gotten, which is very extensive. So let's see. And that is the plan development team that are going to be working on that. And as you can see, I did print out and provide to you the work plan so that we can review that as we go along. But on your work plan, it does tell you that we anticipate that coming back to you at your November meeting. Staff will begin drafting the false albacore issue paper with management options, including rulemaking, based on that feedback that we received from you yesterday. And then today you approved supplemental management for striped mullet. Amendment 2 is well underway, and so the solicitation period, as the director said, for the FMP Advisory Committee did close on May 19th, which was last Friday. So the advisory committee will be appointed soon. And as you can see on your work plan, again, we're anticipating draft Amendment 2 to come to you for review in November of this year, with final adoption scheduled for May 2024, just as a reminder and regarding Commissioner Rader's comment on keeping it on time. So you just approved notice of text for rulemaking for the 130 rules. These rules are going to be published in the North Carolina Register, and a public comment period, including a public hearing, will be held. So I will be reaching out to you, Chairman Bizzle, for a hearing officer for that meeting. And your next meeting is scheduled for August 23rd through the 25th. And for the first time since 2019, it will be held in Raleigh at the Hilton North Hills Hotel in Raleigh. So Raleigh. That's just as a reminder. And at that meeting, you will be electing a vice chair. You'll be taking a vote on the eligibility pool, for the Scuffle eligibility pool, and then also you will be receiving the annual fishery management plan review, which staff do every year, and then they will be presenting in that meeting as well. And that concludes my remarks.
Great. Appreciate the update. Excuse me. Like she said, we'll see y'all in Raleigh for our next meeting. Remember, we're going to have an email address change. I think it's today or tomorrow, so pay attention to that. Leave your name tags here. And we are adjourned. Thank you for your efforts and help and caring for the resource.